Hello, and welcome to the show where I try and keep people as informed as possible about things they didn't know that they cared about. Today we're going to be talking about small form characters and races. Some people know them as lollies, and those people would be wrong, except for the times where they're not wrong, in which case they would be right. So to keep things simple, a small form character is a character that is physically small. It's not really that hard to understand. However, I want to make it clear that being small does not, and I repeat, does not mean that they are a child. I have an old friend of mine who's the exact same age as me, and sadly she's going to be asked for her ID to buy alcohol and get into R-rated movies until she's in her early 40s. She's small, and she looks very young, but she is not a child. Again, not a child. Treating her like one is not only factually incorrect, but incredibly rude. Now, with that being said, the entertainment industry, particularly video games and anime, specifically have examples of doing this right and of doing this wrong. So, one of the examples of doing this right would be the lalafell. In case you don't know, the lalafell is a race in Final Fantasy XIV, and if you're wondering why I'm still talking about Final Fantasy XIV after my MMOs Make You a Bad Person video, stop it. Just stop. I never said I was quitting that game. It was wrong of you to assume that I was quitting that game. I can do whatever I want. You can't stop me. The description for lalafell reads as follows. I'm just going to read a little bit of it. A wee people sporting short, rotund bodies. The lalafell appear as no more than children to the eyes of most. Many of these nimble little folk hail from the islands of the South Seas, where they practice a simple agricultural lifestyle. It was not until the opening of maritime trade routes that the gradual migration of lalafells to Eorzea began. Now, you'll notice that there's some key words in there. Appear as and children to most. That is appearance, what they look like. Now, I think that there have been enough major historic events to let us all know that we shouldn't judge people by what they look like. Again, those key words are appear, children, most. Appear. That's the big one. Appear. With that properly established, I can go ahead and say that the world of Final Fantasy is very diverse with its races and ages, so you can see each race intermingling with each other in ways of conflict, trade, romance, all of that. And that especially goes true for children. So throughout the world, you'll see children of all of the races fighting, playing, going to school together, all of that. So, they're just a race of people. Now, if someone were to say that they wanted to marry a lalafell, it happens. It has to. That's how children are made. It's not weird because they aren't kids. But that's not to say that that's always the case. Take Terra's Ellens, for example. Ellens are a race of fairies that live for thousands of years, but it isn't established how they're born. They don't act or behave in any way that's different between, their child life and their adult life. So they're essentially a writer or an artist drew a child and said, that's 1,000 years old. On top of that, they are hypersexualized and oddly loved. They are adored in the game of Terra. They are the most played race. People will bend over backwards to help you and give you stuff just by picking this race, which is a very stark contrast from Final Fantasy XIV's lalafell. Now, Final Fantasy XIV did it right. Terra didn't. Terra did it wrong. But when the line isn't so clear is when things can get downright creepy and actually kind of frustrating. Back in 2010, there was an anime called Dance in the Vampire Bund, and it was about a vampire queen named Mina Tepesh who was going to build a safe haven for vampires on the outside the coast of Japan. And she took the form of a small child, or not child, a small person. She appeared to be a child, and that's what people, including the main character, originally assumed. But she didn't act like one. She didn't necessarily sound like one. She for all intents and purposes, was just an adult trapped in a small body. Fine. So far, so good. It's established her age, and it makes sense in the context of her being a vampire. So far, no creepy. Where things do get creepy, though, is, I want to say maybe halfway, a little over halfway, she gets into a fight with the main character, and she takes the form of a appearingly older woman. And it's never explained why this happened or how this happened, if this was a part of her powers or anything like that. It just happened. Now that is a problem, because it leads you to think that the only reason that she appears to be young is because the writers wanted her to. Now, at first, it wasn't a case of it was, but wasn't a case of drew a child, call it 1,000. But when you go ahead and you give them a form that isn't small, that isn't young in appearance, and don't explain why or how it happened, then it's like, okay, then why isn't she like that all the time? Well, because the writers didn't want her to be like that all the time. They wanted her to be a kid, and they wanted to hypersexualize her, and they wanted to do it in a way that wouldn't make them look creepy, but then they made it creepy, you know? So that was an instance of, you started off doing it right, but you really screwed it up there towards the end. Now, this whole video kind of got started when I don't have a lalafell in Final Fantasy XIV, or at least I didn't. I was going to make one for another video idea that I had, and I was talking to members of a free company that I was a part of. Free company is like a guild. They didn't want me to do it, basically. They hated lalafells. All lalafells are children, and anybody who plays a lalafell is a pedophile, is pretty much word for word what they said. And this got a whole argument started, split the group in half versus it was people who were like, lalafells aren't children, and people who play them aren't all pedos, versus the people who are. And I kind of just wanted to understand why they thought that, why they were so intent. It's like they wanted the lalafells to be children. And I got kicked from it. I got blacklisted from the free company, the link shells that I were a part of. Basically, I'm pretty much blacklisted by everyone on my server except for a very few people. Very, very few. And, you know, it was so jarring, this hive mind mentality. It's like, obviously the conversation made them uncomfortable, and that's fine. This is obviously a very sensitive topic when it comes to the age of non-existent people, you know? Like, is it creepy? Is it not creepy? The answer is it can be, but to some people, they just don't want anything to do with it. They don't want anything to do with people who have things to do with it. And it was a huge mess. I discovered a modding community for the PC version of Final Fantasy XIV. And I tripped over this mod that I'll put up on the screen. And what it does is like it says, it removes lalafells. Or, more accurately, it replaces lalafells with a box, so that they don't have any part of the game. And this really threw me for a loop, because it's so, the idea of a lalafell being in the game is so appealing, or so, not appealing, so disgusting and so wrong that people have gone out of their way to remove them from the game. And this mentality and this huge community cult of hatred for this weird race is so strong that people who are new to the game are under pressure to not make one, regardless of whether they want to, and regardless of what their reasons are for wanting to make one. A lot of people have come to me and said, I was going to make a lalafell, but people are calling them children, and people are calling people who play them pedophiles, and I don't want anything to do with that. They're being damned before they even get started, and it's not great. It's not a great time, especially for the developers. I really have to feel for them, because they took time to make this race, give them context, give them, a sense of, they really included them very well implemented into the world of Final Fantasy XIV, and the community's response for the most part, has been ew, gross. They're children. And Discord has basically labeled anything involving lalafells as child pornography, which is incredibly uncool. It's one thing to have your terms of service, and you don't want child porn on your service. You don't. No one does. But when you go and you label somebody else's creation something so damning, something so it's harsh on the ears, the words child pornography, and they just went and slapped that label on without knowing anything about it, and the community has kind of taken to it and has formed this incorrect opinion and are going around with their pitchforks and their torches, and they're really giving it to people. And I think that that's very uncool and not appreciative. Don't appreciate that at all. The drama itself, at least surrounding me, wasn't so bad. I can't really do anything on my home server anymore. None of the crafting guilds will sell to me. No one wants to be in my party. No one wants me in their party, so I've basically had to swap servers, which, if you're familiar with Final Fantasy XIV at all, is not easy, and it's not free. It's a $18 thing that I have to do. So I essentially just made a new character. Guys, look, you don't have to like it. This video isn't to make you like small, petite, little, young-looking characters in anime or video games, but you have to have a level of tolerance. And if you don't like them, that's fine. But don't go ruining the experience for someone who does. Don't go slapping labels on them. And don't judge people by what they like or what they look like. Judge them by what they do. If no one's hurting you, then why would you go and hurt them? Why would you go and ruin their experience? If it's that bad, then don't play. Or just have as little to do with it as you can, You don't have to be so antagonistic towards people. And you especially do not have to form groups to hate on other groups of people. That's part of the reason that the world is in the state that it's in. So keep that in mind as you play your games, as you watch your anime, as you watch your shows, your cartoons, whatever it is, reading your manga, reading your books, whatever it is. Just have kind of an open mind. It's all about context. It's about how well the writers and creators establish what that character or what that race's place and purpose is within the context of that world. If they're children, they're children, and you'll know that they're children because it'll be incredibly creepy. Lalafells aren't really that creepy. The people who play them can be annoying and can be creepy, but it's mostly what they say. I've not been creeped out by any of the official dialogue from Lalafell NPCs. Nothing that the developers have said has been really creepy or targeted towards them. So it's not a problem, at least not for me. And I don't want to make it a problem for them because it's not a problem for me. And if it's not a problem for you, don't make it a problem for anyone else. That's all I wanted to say. Hopefully next week we'll have a more laid-back topic to talk about. But I do hope that you'll join me. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Drop a comment. Tell me what you guys think about small form characters. Do you think that it's bullshit? Do you wish that it would stop? Do you think that any small form race is just a child that's been drawn by someone and had a 4-digit year slapped on it to make it a lot creepy? Let me know in the comments. I hope you join me for the next video. See you guys later. Peace.